Republic of the Philippines.
The 31st session of the Senate and the first regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. Our distinguished colleague, Senator J.V. Ejercito, will lead the chamber in prayer.
Let us put our prayers in the Lord. O aming Ama, sana po'y gabayan niyo kami, lalo ngayon ay papasa na po namin ang aming budget at marami ho kaming mga dapat talakayin, na lagi niyo kayong gabayan, na lagi namin ipaglalaban ang interes ng karami at ang hangarin na may ang antas ng buhay ng bawat Pilipino. Gabayan niyo po kami na lagi tayong nasa tama at laging ipaglalaban ang interes ng nakarami. Ang lahat ng ito ay inaalay namin sa iyo. Ang nagawin nun. Amen.
Amen. Secretary, will you please call the roll of members?
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
With 19 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, before we proceed with anything, today is the birthday of our dear friend, colleague, Senator Robin Hood Padilla. And so we greet him a happy, victorious birthday, Mr. President.
Happy birthday to our distinguished colleague, ating kapatid na si Senator Robin Hood Padilla. May I ask for a 1-minute suspension?
As I'm about to ask,
You may
Mr.
approach him
President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Session
Happy
suspended.
birthday.
Senator Robin Padilla, happy birthday.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 30th Session, Tuesday, November 22, 2022, and consider the same as approved. So move, Mr.
There be
President.
no objection. The motion is approved.
Mr. President, we'd like to greet our guests from the gallery, guests of Senator Lauren Legarda, Mayor Johnny Flores Bangcongalio, and Vice Mayor Tomas Bacauco from the municipality of Patnongon, province of Antique. Guests of Senator J.V. Ejercito, Mayor Edgar Rama of Poro, Cebu, and former Mayor, our good friend, Mr. President, Mayor Bernard D. of Kawayan, Isabela. We welcome them all.
Yes, to all our guests, welcome to your Senate, gentlemen and ladies.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of House Bill number 4488 as reported out under Committee Report number 10. This is the General Appropriations Act of 2023. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion of the Majority Floor Leader, motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is we already closed the period of interpellations and debate. With that, I move to open the period of amendments and recognize the chairperson of the Committee on Finance, the gentleman from the great province of Aurora, Senator Sani Angara.
The hardworking, indefatigable gentleman from the province of Aurora, our distinguished colleague, Senator Edgardo Angara, is hereby recognized. I cannot see him though.
Thank you,
Oh,
Mr.
he's sitting down. Ano sa likod? Oh, okay.
1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Yes,
1 minute
session suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the previous question to acknowledge and recognize the chairperson of the Committee on Finance, Senator Sani Angara. So
Distinguished
moved, Mr.
gentleman from Aurora is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader, distinguished colleagues. Good afternoon. Pagkatapos po ng higit isang linggo ng mga debate at talakayan dito sa plenaryo, handa na po ang inyong Committee on Finance para ihain ang ilang amendments sa Committee Report number 10 tungkol sa pambansang budget nitong 2023 on House Bill 4488. Karamihan kung hindi lahat ng mga senador ay may inimungkahing pagbabago at sinubukan po natin tulungan ang lahat ng ating kasamahan maging sa mayorya o sa minorya. Sinigurado po natin na kahit may pagbabago sa detalye ng panukala, humahalili pa rin ang kabuuan ng panukalang budget sa mga adhikay ng bagong administrasyon ni Presidente Bongbong Marcos Jr. Pinakinggan din natin ang mga naiisip ng ating mga kasamahan tulad ng mga mainit na issue at dahil dito naglipat po tayo ng ilang halaga mula sa confidential funds para mailagay sa MOE o maintenance and other operating expenses ng ibang ahensya. Pinagtibay po natin ang mga programa at proyekto para lalong umigting ang food security natin bilang bansa sa pamamagitan ng pagpapalakas ng ating agrikultura. Sa mungkahi ni Senior Vice Chair Amy Marcos, nilinaw po natin na ang pondong nakalaan para sa Kadiwa ni Ani at Kita program ay gagamitin para makapagbuo ng isang distribution system kung saan ang mga ani ng mga magsasaka at mga huli ng mga mangingisda ay diretsong makakaabot sa mga bibili nito sa murang halaga. Sa rekomendasyon ni Senator Marcos, patuloy ang pondo para sa Young Farmers Challenge Fund na gagamitin para sa mga programang makakapaghikayat sa kabataan na bumalik o lumahok sa agrikultura at bigyan ng pagkakataon na makabili o makaupa ng lupa na maaari nilang tamnan. Tuloy pa rin ang Protective Services for Individuals and Families in Difficult Circumstances program ng DSWD kung saan napapaloob ang Assistance to Communities in Need o ACN Community-Based Program at ang Assistance to Individuals in Crisis Situations o ang AICS na dinagdagan po ng ating Kamara alinsunog sa hiling no less ni Senate President Zubiri at Majority Leader Villanueva, Minority Leader Pimentel, Senior Vice Chairperson and Senate President Pro Tempore Legarda, Vice Chairperson Cynthia at Mark Villar, Grace Po, Nancy Binay, JV Ejercito, Francis Tolentino Bongo, Risa Ontiveros, Bato de la Rosa at sina Senador Jinggoy Estrada, Robin Padilla, Bong Revilla, Alan Peter Cayetano, Lito Lapid at Rafi Tulfo. Sa hiling din po nila magkakaroon ng mas malaking pondo para sa government internship program at sa tulong panghanap buhay sa ating disadvantaged or displaced workers programs o tupad sa ilalim ng DOLE. Sinigurado din po natin na sa susunod na taon handa ang iba't ibang ahensya ng gobyerno para tumugon at tumulong kapag may dumating na sakuna o kalamidad sa ating bansa. Halimbawa, may malaking pondo para sa siyam na ahensya bilang QRF or Quick Response Fund nila. Kasama po dito ang DA, DepEd, DOH, DILG, BFP, DILG, PNP, DND, DPWH, DSWD at DA-NIA. Mananatili din ang halaga para sa National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Fund o NDRRMF. Naglagay rin tayo ng special provision tungkol sa pagtayo ng mga green evacuation centers na kung saan bibigyan ng prioridad ang mga high-risk areas batay sa GeoRisk Philippines ng DOST PhilVox. Nilinaw din natin na sa ilalim ng bridge program ng DPWH, kailangan gastusan ng ahensya ang pagkakaroon ng assessment ng structural strength, repair at retrofitting ng mga national bridges ng bansa, lalong-lalo na sa mga lugar na madalas tamaan ng bagyo o kaya may malaking risk sa lindol at iba pang mga seismic activities. Once again, Mr. President, your committee affirmed that education shall receive the highest budgetary priority in the coming year. We have ensured that government will pull all the stops it can so that every Filipino is given ample opportunity to gain an education or to receive proper skills training. Funding support shall also be increased for the training programs under TESDA, including the STEP or Special Training for Employment and the Training for Work Scholarship Program or TWSP. Special provisions have also been included mandating the DOLE and TESDA to work on the convergence of their respective training and livelihood programs to ensure that beneficiaries are able to stay employed or to have a steady source of income. Tuloy-tuloy din po ang suporta para sa pagresponde sa pandemya sa pagpapaigting ng ating sistemang pangkalusugan. Pagdating naman sa pagpapalakas ng ating sistema, popondohan pa rin ng Senado ang Health Facilities Program or HFEP ng DOH. May dagdag rin para sa iba't ibang hospital ng DOH kasama ang National Children's Hospital na tingin namin ay katutuwa ni Senator Tulfo. Sa pag-uudyok din ni na Senior Vice Chair Pia Cayetano at Vice Chair Bongo at JV Ejercito, naglagay po tayo ng malaking pondo bilang tulong sa pagtayo ng mga specialty hospitals sa iba't ibang rehiyon ng bansa. Isang programa na malapit sa puso ng ating Pangulo. Magkakaroon din ng malaking pondo para sa benefit package improvements sa ilalim ng PhilHealth sang-ayon sa Universal Healthcare Law. Ang pondong ito ay pwedeng gamitin sa pag-expand o paglaki ng coverage para sa mga sakit tulad ng dialysis, mental health outpatient services, Z-benefit packages, severe acute malnutrition at iba pang outpatient benefits tulad ng libreng konsulta, libreng lab test at diagnostic services, gamot at mga emergency medical services. Nadagdagan din po ang pondo para sa medical assistance to indigent and financially incapacitated patients or MAIP para punan ng gobyerno ang pagpapagamot ng ating mga mahihirap na kababayan. Sa rekomendasyon naman ni Vice Chair Risa Hontiveros, dinagdagan ang pondo ng Philippine National AIDS Council. Bukod sa edukasyon at kalusugan, mahalaga ang sa ating kaunlaran ang mabisang sistema para sa pampublikong transportasyon. Kaya bukod sa mga proyekto sa ilalim ng Build Better More program ng gobyerno, sinigurado din po natin na nakatuon ang gobyerno sa kapakanan ng ating mga commuter. Halimbawa, nakasaad sa isang special provision kung saan gagamitin lamang para sa paggawa, pag-upgrade at pag-rehabilitate ng mga kalye, tulay at road drainage ang koleksyon mula sa Motor Vehicle Users Charge. Kasama dito ang paglalagay sa lahat ng mga bridge at road projects ng mga bike lanes, pedestrian walkways, grade crosswalks, accessibility ramps, open and green spaces, pedestrian refuge islands, at iba pang tinatawag na road safety features at active transportation facilities, alinsunod sa mungkahi ng ating Vice Chair, Senator Grace Poe. The committee has also assured several initiatives in support of developing our energy sector. Upon the initiative of Vice Chair Gatchalian, significant funding under the DOE from the fees and revenues earned from the exploration, development, exploitation of energy resources shall be used exclusively for the total electrification project, specifically the components identified and approved by the National Electrification Administration and National Power Corporation. Mr. President, funding shall also be provided for the organization of the Philippine Energy Research and Policy Institute, again upon the initiative of Vice Chair Gatchalian, pursuant to the law he authored to improve our knowledge and know-how on energy policy. We also continue to provide support for our MSMEs and small businesses, all in support of the administration's drive for inclusion and to transform our economy. Upon the recommendation of Senior Vice Chair Marcos, some programs of the DTI will receive increased funding, such as the Shared Services Facilities Program, the Malikahing Pinoy Program, in support of the new Philippine Creative Industries Development Act, also supported by Vice Chair Mark Villar. Upon Vice Chair Hontiveros' request, we have also increased appropriations for the Cooperative Development Authority, including its celebration of National Cooperatives Month. I know this is also dear to our presiding officer. And for the capacity development of Cooperative Development Councils or CDCs and of local cooperative development officers, among many others. Sa tulong naman po ni Vice Chair Nancy Binay, sinisigurado din natin na may suporta para sa Department of Tourism para lalong lumago ang turismo sa ating bansa. Dinagdagan natin ang pondo para sa operational expenses ng mga foreign offices ng DOT. At naglagay rin tayo ng special provision kung saan binibigyan ng halaga ang mga ecotourism sites at ang mga green hotels at accommodation facilities para lalong mapangalagaan ang angking ganda ng ating kalikasan. Alinsunod sa panukala ni Senior Vice Chair Loren Legarda, hinihikayat din po ang DOT na makipag-coordinate sa ibang ahensya ng gobyerno tulad ng NCCA, DA, DENR at mga LGU para maitanghal ng tama ang mga magagandang tanawin sa mga bumibisitang turista. Indeed, Mr. President, our tourism can be bolstered further if significant support is also given to preserving, conserving, and promoting our culture and heritage. Notable increases were made in many of our cultural agencies, namely the National Commission on Culture and the Arts, the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, the National Library of the Philippines, and the National Archives of the Philippines. We included a special provision introduced by Senior Vice Chair Cayetano on the continued conservation and restoration of Gabaldon school buildings and other notable heritage school buildings across the country, pursuant to a law we passed a few years ago. Cultural and heritage conservation is also about ensuring that traditional skills are not lost. This is why we included a special provision enjoining the TESDA, in coordination with the NCCA, the Philippine Textile Research Institute, and the Philippine Fiber Industry Development Authority, to include in their non-formal technical vocational education and training programs such skills as wood carving, pottery making, weaving, arts and crafts. Sa larangan naman po ng pabahay o housing, tinulungan po tayo ni Vice Chair Hontiveros para siguraduhin na kasabay ng mga malalaking infrastructure projects ng bansa, may sapat na lupang nakalaan para sa socialized at economic housing. Ayon sa isang special provision na isinulong ni Vice Chair Risa, tinatawag ang DSUD na makipag-usap sa NEDA at DOTR para makabuo ng land use at zoning guidelines at makabili ng mga lupa sa pamamagitan ng mga key shelter agencies nito para masigurado na may affordable housing na malapit sa mga tinatawag na transit stations. May dagdag din para sa National Housing Authority or NHA at kasama dito ang hiling na Badjao Housing ng ating birthday boy, Senator Robin Hood Padilla. Patuloy din pong dinidiin ng ating panukalang budget ang halaga ng decentralization at devolution para sa kaunlaran ng ating bansa. Tulad po ng binabanggit natin noong sponsorship speech, umaabot sa 820 plus billion ang national tax allotment na mapupunta sa ating mga local government units sa darating na taon at umaasa tayong tatas ito sa darating na mga taon. At bukod dito, meron tayong growth equity fund na magsisilbing financial assistance para sa mga dehadong nahuhuling mga LGU na nangangailangan ng tulong para paigtingin ang kanilang kakayanan para makapaghain ng serbisyo sa kanilang mga mamamayan. Mr. President, national defense, upholding the rule of law, and protecting the lives and safety of our people also remain among our chief budgetary priorities. Upon the initiative of Vice Chair Bongo, additional appropriations were given for the modernization of the Bureau of Fire Protection, which includes the acquisition and improvement of facilities, purchase of fire trucks, firefighting and personal protective equipment, and other necessary emergency and rescue equipment. We included the increases recommended by Minority Leader Coco Pimentel and Vice Chair Risa Ontiveros for the civil works requested by the NBI, also supported by our Majority Leader and Senator Raffy Tulfo. To ensure greater representation and perhaps promote a more compassionate law enforcement regime, we have adopted a proposal of Vice Chair Poe for a special provision that calls on the PNP or Philippine National Police to ensure that at least 10% of all new patrol officer recruits shall be female applicants who shall be assigned to fill up vacancies in women and children's desks. We continue to support all efforts to strengthen our diplomatic corps and to further enable them to project a better image of our country throughout the world. For instance, the DFA OSEC will receive increases to its diplomacy program, its consular assistance to national program, as well as augmentations for the purchase of various office equipment, and the operational expenses of some strategic foreign posts, such as Tokyo, Japan, and Brussels, Belgium, and the United Kingdom. Paigtingin din po natin, Mr. President, ang mga programa at proyekto ng gobyerno para alagaan at protektahan ang ating kalikasan at palawakin palalo ang kaalaman ng mga tao tungkol sa climate change. Sumang-ayon tayo sa special provision ni Senior Vice Chair Legarda na minamandato ang DNR na manguna sa pagtayo at maintenance ng isang climate change information management system and network bilang isang plataforma kung saan makikita ang lahat ng climate change risks ng bansa at ang mga activities and investments hinggil dito para magamit sa national at local development planning and program implementation. Ayon din sa isa pang special provision, galing rin din kay Senior Vice Chair Legarda, minamandato ang Local Government Academy na magkaroon ng mga training programs tungkol sa paggawa ng enhanced local climate change action plans at sa mga batas hinggil sa environmental protection, ecological solid waste management, climate change adaptation and mitigation at disaster risk reduction. Our support for Philippine sports and athletes will also not waver, Mr. President. For instance, through the support of Vice Chair Bongo, significant infusions will be made into the Philippine Sports Commission as support for our elite athletes who are training for regional, and world competitions such as the Paris Olympics, the SEA Games, the Asian Games, the Asian Indoor Martial Arts Games, the World Beach Games, the Asian Beach Games, the ASEAN Para Games, the Asian Para Games, and other necessary augmentations to further empower our athletes so that they can win even more competitions at the global scale, giving prestige and pride to our country. Additions were also included for training seminars and competitions for our NIS, something very dear to our Senate President, and for our participation at the Volleyball Nations League upon the initiative of Senators Alan and Pia Cayetano, our Senior Vice Chair. For the preparation, training, and support for the Samahang Kickboxing and the Philippine ROTC Games as recommended by Vice Chair Senator Francis Tolentino. For our part, we have also included significant additions to the PSC to support the efforts of the Samahang Basketball ng Pilipinas in hosting the FIBA World Cup here in the Philippines in 2023. Mr. President, iilan lamang po ito sa mga highlights ng pag-amyenda natin para sa panukalang budget ng bansa sa susunod na taon. May isinumuti rin tayo na mas buong listahan at breakdown ng mga amendments para masiyasat at pag-aralan ng plenaryo. With the inputs and support of most if not all our colleagues here in the Senate, we have been able to keep this budget aligned with the objectives and the agenda outlined in the Medium-Term Fiscal Framework or MTFF. Let this be a sign of our broad support to the goals set by the Marcos administration and our principled commitment to promoting a unified government for the betterment of our people. We thank profusely the Senate leadership, Senate President Mig Zubiri, Senate President Pro Temp Loren Legarda, and Majority Floor Leader Joel Villanueva and his deputies, Deputy Majority Leader leaders J.V. Ejercito and Mark Villar, also our Vice Chair, and Minority Leader Coco Pimentel, and Deputy Minority Leader Risa Ontiveros, also a Vice Chair, for their very hard work over the last 2 weeks, Mr. President. Our work would not have been possible also, of course, without the efforts of the staffs of the various senators from our different offices, the Senate Secretariat, and most especially the late nights put in by our highly competent men and women of the LBRMO, led by Director Irene Palanca. Thank you, Mr. President. We're ready to discuss some of the amendments from our colleagues.
Majority Leader.
Who wants to? Can I ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
President, before we continue with the discussion on the amendments, period of amendments, Mr. President, may I move that we recognize and welcome to the Senate Congressman Juan Fidel Felipe Nograles of Rizal, 4th District, guest of our colleague, Senator Jinggoy Estrada, and Mayor Cocoy Salvador of San Jose City, Nueva Ecija, guest of Senator Bongo.
Welcome Congressman Nograles, Mayor Salvador, and Mayor Rama to your Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we are in the period of amendments, and first to discuss with the chairperson of the Committee on Finance is our, no less than our Minority Floor Leader. I move that Senator Coco Pimentel be recognized, Mr. President.
Our Minority Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And our chairman of the Committee on Finance read to us the proposed committee amendments, if I am not mistaken. That's a committee amendment. So I would like to solicit just more information so as to guide us in the whether to support the various components of the committee amendment, Mr. President. So, my question is about just one matter in the long list of the.
Yes,
commi-
sir. We are most willing.
amendments,
And again,
yes.
we thank our minority leader because so far we are on track. And his willingness to work late at night certainly contributed. He and the deputy minority leader. Thank you. My thanks to them, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. But connected with the comment of our chairman, in the next budget cycle, can we ask for a 10-day?
A longer period.
Yes, 10 days. 10 days. It will not affect the calendar. Actually, it's Monday to Friday and Monday to Friday.
That
I
is
think-
noted, Your Honor.
I think that we can
Yes.
make.
We will make the adjustment, Your Honor.
The discussion would be of better quality, Mr. President. So, just one point on the motion of our chairman. I think he mentioned that some confidential and intelligence funds were reduced, and the amount of the reduction was transferred to MOOE. Did I hear that correctly,
That's correct,
Mr.
Your
Chairman?
Honor.
So can we get more details, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
What
The-
CIF are affected, and by how much is the total, and basically where did the reduction go?
There is a total realignment of 152,668,000 pesos worth of confidential and intelligence funds, broken down as follows, Your Honor. For the DepEd, 100 million was realigned to the OVP. For DFA, 5 million was realigned to MOE. For the DOJ, 19.2 million. For the DND, nothing for the DND. For the DSWD, 2 million was realigned. And for the other executive offices, a total of 6 million was realigned. And for the Ombudsman, 20 million was realigned. All within the agency, Your Honor, because we did not want to deprive the agencies of their budgets, but placed under maintenance and other operating expenses, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr.
This is,
President.
if I may add, with your permission, Minority Leader, of course, trying to be sensitive and respond to the points raised by His Honor.
Yes, so if I were to just focus on the Office of the Vice President's Confidential Fund, the effect of the amendment is to increase this? Nag-increase pa po?
It's the same, Your Honor. We put it in the MOE of the OVP, Your Honor. Other MOE.
Okay, so it's, yes. So 100 million taken from the confidential fund of the DepEd transferred to the OVP but not in the confidential fund of the
That's
OVP
correct, Your Honor.
in its various programs.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, naintindihan ko na po. Apo. And then iniwanan po natin ng 50 million ng confidential fund si DepEd.
Opo.
Tama. Okay, Mr. President, just for information na lang po ito of the body kasi I really wanted to be consistent with our own definition of confidential fund and intelligence fund. So that's why in my proposed amendments in writing to the chairman, I was really consistent, sir. I was really fair, no? Kung
Yes,
hindi ko ma-justify sa mind ko yung civilian agency conducting surveillance activities.
We
So I really moved that, the confi would be reduced to zero, in effect removed. So
We confirm that, Your Honor.
Yes,
We received a letter from the good minority leader asking for the realignment of think close to 4 billion, if I'm not mistaken, worth of confidential and intelligence funds to be realigned to various programs. So we confirm the point of the Minority Leader, Mr. President.
Around 3 billion, Mr. Chairman.
3 point something,
A little
yeah.
more than 3 billion. So just for the record, anyway, yan lang naman din po yung tatanungin ko about the pending motion by the chairman. Just to read into the record our own definition, ulitin ko na lang po, Mr. Chairman, on confidential fund.
sir.
No?
Yes, sir.
Confidential fund refers to the lump sum amount provided as such in the General Appropriations Act for national government agencies for their confidential expenses. Okay, I'm just reading the definition applicable to the NGAs. No? Ang confidential expenses naman refer to those expenses pertaining related to surveillance activities in civilian government agencies that are intended to support the mandate of or operations of the said agency. Intelligence fund refers to the lump sum amount provided as such in the GAA for the NGAs. And then intelligence expenses refer to those related to intelligence information gathering activities of uniformed and military personnel and intelligence practitioners that have direct impact to national security. So ang debate na lang namin ni Chairman is on whether or not, pagdating sa intelligence fund, whether or not the Office of the President is entitled to incur intelligence expenses. Ang position po of this representation, it is not a uniformed or military agency, and also it is not an intelligence practitioner. But the
We
standard-
respect that, Your Honor.
Yes,
We respect
we
that.
have a
Unfortunately, we cannot agree.
Yes, we have a difference of opinion. So, I think that's the only clarification I need. So at least klaro na po 'yon, no? So
Opo, sir.
I got the misimpression that the confidential fund of the OVP was even increased. Hindi pala.
Hindi po.
Okay, hindi
po.
pala. Naklaro po. So, thank you for accommodating my searching questions for more information, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Salamat. Thank you again. I reiterate my thanks to the Minority Leader and the Deputy Minority Leader for the hard work they put in. And despite all the late nights, their willingness to engage in meaningful debate, I thank them, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I move for a minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
President, during the break, we have talked to our colleagues, especially with the minority leader and deputy minority leader, and I was allowed to make this motion, and so I will move to approve the committee amendments as presented and contained in the list furnished to every member of this August chamber. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to close the period of committee amendments. I so move,
There
Mr.
being no
President.
objection to the motion, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to open the period of individual amendments. So move.
There being no objection, the period of individual amendments is hereby open.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize our Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros, and to continue sponsoring the measure, the chairperson of the Committee on Finance, Senator Sani Angara. So move, Mr. President.
For distinguished lady senator from the island of Panay and the Republic of the Philippines, Senator Risa Ontiveros recognized.
Salamat kaayo, Mr. President. Magandang hapon, Chairman.
Good afternoon, Madam Deputy Minority Leader, also a Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Chair. I was originally going to make just one proposed amendment, but I've broken it up into two parts because of the update in the proposal just approved by the body from the chair of the Finance Committee. So, Mr. Chair, at this point, I would like to make a motion to realign the 100 million pesos, which was earlier realigned from the confidential fund of the DepEd to the OVP MOOE back to DepEd MOOE. In particular, DepEd's Healthy Learners Institution program found in the Support to Schools and Learners program of their budget. I so move, Mr. Chair.
We accept, Mr. President. We accept, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, the motion is approved.
Just to clarify, Mr. President, that is why I'm so happily surprised. Earlier, I thought that it might not be accepted, but if it is accepted, thank you very much, Mr. President. And I'm sure that all our education reform advocates will heave a sigh of relief that at least they retain that 100 million, but no longer in the confidential fund of DepEd, but in the MOEE, particularly the Healthy Learners Institution program found in the Support to Schools and Learners program. So finally, at this point, Mr. President, Mr. Chair, I would like to make the second and last proposed amendment, which, given the happy fate of the first amendment, I can already guess the fate of this one. But for the record, I shall still propose it, Mr. Chair, Mr. President. Mr. Chair, at this point, finally, I would like to make a motion to realign the remaining 50 million pesos of the confidential fund of the DepEd, also in support of their Healthy Learners Institution program, found in the Support to Schools and Learners program of their budget, specifically with reference to the appropriate pages and lines of the GAB. I move to remove the confidential funds of the Department of Education found in Volume 1A of the GAB, page 372, line 55 of the General Appropriations Bill, in the amount of 50 million pesos, and transfer the same to augment the MOOE of the Support to Schools and Learners program of the DepEd, found in Volume 1A of the GAB, page 194, line 31. The new amount of the MOOE of the Support to Schools and Learners program will now be, also including the 100 million pesos subject of the earlier accepted amendment, for which I thank my chair, will now be 95,852,200,000 pesos. I so move, Mr. Chair.
I regret to say I cannot accept the amendment, but if the lady would be so kind to accept a amendment to her amendment, where we leave perhaps rather than a zero balance of the DepEd, perhaps we could leave a 30 million balance and realign the 20 million to your stated purpose. So as we don't have to put our colleagues on the spot, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Chair, for not sending this representation away empty-handed on her second proposed amendment. May I just request a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President?
Suspended.
Status is that the distinguished lady from Akbayan made a motion for an amendment which was not really accepted in totality, but there is an amendment to the amendment by the committee chair. May we know from the deputy minority leader of her response, Mr. President?
I accept, Mr. President, with thanks to the chair.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President.
May I then, since my proposed amendment, though the chair did not send this representation away empty-handed, since my second proposed amendment was not completely accepted, may I then propose a special provision that will compel the DepEd to create a work plan on the use of their confidential funds. The special provision shall read, DepEd Work Plan for Confidential Funds. The DepEd shall submit to both houses of Congress its proposed work plan for the appropriated confidential funds of the agency. I so move, Mr. Chair.
We accept, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And lastly, Mr.
Objection.
Chair, Mr.
Just
sorry,
for the
Mr.
record,
President. Yes.
let me accept first both amendments. Both amendments have no objections, therefore approved.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. And lastly, Mr. President, Mr. Chair, I would like to place on record my continuing objection to the propriety of lodging confidential funds in agencies not involved in national security. And the propriety, not just the amount, Mr. President, Mr. Chair, is important because even the head of one of the agencies for which Congress was originally appropriating confidential funds in the hearing here at the Senate said that she would submit to the wisdom of Congress in terms of the propriety and the amount. Mayroon po tayong mga ahensyang mas nangangailangan ng pondo para sa surveillance at ibang programa para sa seguridad ng bansa, tulad ng ating advokasya para sugpuin ang human trafficking at OSAE. Let me reiterate that we should leave these dangerous tasks to the professionals. Dagdag pa po dyan, all public funds should always be subject to audit. Dapat alam natin kung saan napupunta ang kaban ng bayan at kung sulit ba ang paglalaan ng ganitong kalaking pondo sa isang ahensya. Dahil tens of millions are still tens of millions. And the exceptions to this must be very, very strict. Panata po natin iyan sa mamamayan. Muli po, maraming salamat Mr. Chair at maraming salamat Mr. President.
Thank you to the distinguished minority leader. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you to Senator Risa Ontiveros. Mr. President, next on the list is the distinguished gentleman from the city of San Juan, Senator Jinggoy Estrada. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
The distinguished gentleman from the city of San Juan, Senator Jingo Estrada is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I only have one individual amendment. With regard to the budget of the Optical Media Board, since during the budget hearing, I have already voiced my opinion about even to the extent of abolishing this organization. Anyway, Mr. President, with regard to the budget of the Optical Media Board, which I understand is at 71 million, if I am correct, Mr. Chair. 71 million.
Yes, Your Honor. Is there a motion already?
Not yet. I was just
Yeah,
asking.
please go ahead, Your Honor. Please go ahead.
And may I know how much is
the
the,
budget of the OMB is for personnel services? There's 48.216 million. For MOE, there's 23.441
So
million.
if we can deduct the the personal services, the PS, amounting to 48 million, so 71 million minus 48 equals 23.
0.441, Your Honor.
23. May I move that we realign the 23 million to the from Optical Media Board to the Film Development Council of the Philippines.
We accept, Mr.
I
President.
move. I so move, Mr. President.
We accept, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion,
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you to the gentleman from San Juan.
Thank you. Mr. President, Next is our Minority Floor Leader, Mr. President, Senator Coco Pimentel. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
The distinguished gentleman from Cagayan de Oro, our Minority Floor Leader, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III is recognized.
Mr. President, I cleared this with our chairman earlier that I will just I will have other individual amendments, sir, but itong on the confidential and intelligence funds, if I could just read into the record what I submitted in writing, so as not to prolong the proceedings, to shorten or precisely to shorten our proceedings. So with the permission of the chairman.
Oh, of course, yes,
yan na
most
lang po yun.
certainly.
Okay.
I confirm the agreement reached earlier.
This is what happened, Mr. President and my dear colleagues. No? I propose in writing the deletion of one intelligence fund and then almost all of the confidential funds because precisely to be consistent. No? I'm not singling out the OVP or the DepEd. No? Just to be consistent because of the definitions of the confidential fund and intelligence fund, confidential expenses which can be charged to the confidential fund, and intelligence expenses which can be charged to the intelligence fund under existing law. And to my mind, I cannot justify, given the definition, that the following should be getting intelligence fund and confidential funds. Number one, the intelligence fund of the Office of the President in the amount of 2.25 billion pesos. If we use as reference the 2023 GAB, this is page 19, line 48, volume 1A. I will no longer mention the GAB reference, Mr. President. And then I also propose the deletion of the following confidential funds. Okay, wala po tayong sinisingle out. We are just consistent, applying the definition and then finding the grant of confidential funds to the agencies unjustifiable or cannot be not consistent with the current definition of confidential fund and confidential expenses. Office of the Vice President, 500 million. Department of Education, 150 million. Department of Environment and Natural Resources, 13,950,000. Department of Finance, 1 million. Department of Foreign Affairs, 50 million. Department of the Interior and Local Government, 100,600,000. Department of Justice, 168,041,000. Office of the Solicitor General, 19,200,000. Department of National Defense, 37 million. Department of Social Welfare and Development, 20 million. Maritime Industry Authority, 600,000. Anti-Money Laundering Council, 10 million. Energy Regulatory Commission, 15 million. Games and Amusement Board, 4 million. National Intelligence Coordinating Agency, 1 million. This is a confidential fund because it already has an intelligence fund. Same with the DND I mentioned earlier. National Security Council, 90 million. Meron na rin kasi po itong intelligence fund. Office of the Presidential Advisor on Peace, Reconciliation and Unity, 60 million. Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, 380 million. Commission, we left 120 million in my proposal. I left 120 million as confidential fund for the PIDEA because if we apply the definition, it is one agency, civilian agency, which can justifiably be entitled to confidential funds. Commission on Audit, 10 million. Office of the Ombudsman, 51,468,000. Commission on Human Rights, 1 million. So for the a total deletion or reduction of 3,932,859,000. And then in my written amendments, I mentioned some agencies uh, which could receive this much needed funds, and some have been granted by by our chairman and by the committee. So I'd like to thank the chairman and the committee for granting some of the fund requirements of these agencies for their priority programs. But at any rate, siguro we should not demand a one-to-one correspondence between reduction and augmentation, because what we reduce, which we will not use to augment funds, can be used to reduce the budget deficit. So that would be the result, Mr. President and my dear colleagues, if we had deleted or reduced these unjustified confidential funds. But at any rate, the reduction in the amount of 3.9 billion has not been accepted, but as mentioned earlier in the motion, which is tantamount to a report by our chairman, there are in fact reduction in the some of the grant of confidential funds. Okay, around 152 million, Mr. President. So now to go to my individual amendment, Mr. President, which does not concern which does not concern amounts, Mr. President, but on ano ba to? General provision ba to? General provision. On the general provision on intelligence funds, my proposal, my amendment has the following objective: that we do not allow the use of savings to augment intelligence fund. That this would be now the objective of the following amendment, Mr. President. Ano to? Hindi ko na masabi anong page to. Sabihin ko na sa section. Okay. Section 77 on intelligence funds, general provision, on general provisions. The first paragraph, if we delete the phrase including amounts sourced from savings. So the first paragraph will read, no appropriations authorized in this act as intelligence fund shall be released or disbursed for intelligence activities unless approved by the President of the Philippines. And then we delete the entire second paragraph and replace it with the following paragraph: the use of savings to augment intelligence funds is not allowed. And then in the paragraph, ano bang paragraph na to? 1, 2, 3. In the fourth paragraph of the said provision, we insert the phrase "and both houses of Congress" after the phrase "President of the Philippines," so that the paragraph will read, agencies utilizing intelligence funds shall submit to the President of the Philippines and both houses of Congress a quarterly report on the accomplishments in the use of the said funds. So maybe, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, siguro tanggalin na muna natin yung last ko na mention, yung both houses of Congress, because it captures a separate subject matter. So doon na muna po tayo sa main motion ko po, main proposed amendments ko is na the use of savings to augment intelligence funds is not allowed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Unfortunately, we cannot accept that proposed amendment, which is limiting the power of the President to augment or realign savings to a specific item in the budget. I've been alerted to the case of Gonzales versus Macaraig in 1990, where the Supreme Court said Congress, although it may impose conditions on restrictions as part of its inherent power of appropriations, the restriction must exhibit a connection with money items in a budgetary sense and should not be a general law measure that is a proper subject of separate legislation. So I regret to say we cannot accept, Mr. President.
Hindi ko pa makita. my counter-argument, Mr. President, is that the constitutional provision states the following. Ano to? Article 6, Section 25, Paragraph 5. No law shall be passed authorizing any transfer of appropriations. Bale, yan yung general rule. However, the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and the heads of constitutional commissions may, by law, be authorized to augment any item in the General Appropriations Law for their respective offices from savings in other items of their respective appropriations. So my humble opinion is that we need to grant this power by law. So if we do not grant it by law, therefore the power cannot be exercised. Therefore, it's either from 0 to 100%, and somewhere in between, we can also regulate it by law. So you are given the power to augment, use savings to augment an item, but not the item for intelligence fund. So in effect, the practical effect of this amendment, Mr. President, is what is stated as intelligence fund in the GAA would be the ceiling amount. Klarong-klaro, nakalantad, ceiling na po yan for intelligence funds. That is,
Yes,
that's the net effect, Mr. President.
we understand the argument made by the distinguished minority leader whose legal knowledge and skill is unquestioned, being a bar top-notcher, Mr. President. But unfortunately, this case has to be read in conjunction, this provision has to be read in conjunction with that case of Gonzales versus Macaraig, where the Senate then placed a provision in the budget where they said if that provision stated if Congress would delete a item in the budget, then the President could no longer augment it through the use of savings. And the Supreme Court struck down that provision in the General Appropriations Act, stating that it's not the proper subject because it would unduly limit. It would be a subject of a particular law and not just contained in the GAA, Your Honor. And as to the secondly, there is already a law which authorizes the use of savings. That's the Revised Administrative Code, which reenacted the provision in the former Presidential Decree 1177 that allows the President to augment agency budgets through the use of savings, Your Honor.
Okay, but
So irrespective of what we put here,
Yeah.
there is already existing a law. Yun ang sinasabi po
in the,
natin,
yes, but
Mr. President.
so just to be clarified, so that I can also calmly accept the position of the chairman. But is it the position of the chairman that we can amend the said substantive provision in the revised administrative code?
Yes, I think so, because then we would be compliant with the Supreme Court decision, Your Honor.
So, okay, so, you know, ang problem kasi is the GAA is also a law. So, and yes, but there is a specific substantive provision of law governing the specific situation on the use of savings. Okay, for as long as our stand is that nothing prevents Congress from revisiting that provision and changing policy as expressed in that provision.
Certainly, Your Honor.
Sige, apo. Sige, with that understanding, that in effect it is that the subject matter is better pursued in that law.
Yes, Your Honor. We're just being guided by the Supreme Court in this respect,
Sige
Your
po.
Honor.
Then I'll go to my other amendment concerning the same Section 77, and that is 1, 2, 3. That is
The
on
report, Your Honor.
the fourth paragraph, where we insert the phrase "and both houses of Congress" after the phrase "President of the Philippines," so that it will now read, "Agencies utilizing intelligence funds shall submit to the President of the Philippines and both houses of Congress a quarterly report on the accomplishments in the use of the said funds."
We accept, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wala na kayong iba? Wala na iba? Yung kay Risa, improve natin yung kay Risa. Can I ask for one minute suspension?
Session suspended.
Yep,
Almost done, almost done.
Mr. President, Mr. President, with the permission of the chairman, he accepted the individual amendment of Senator Risa Ontiveros, which asks the DepEd to create a work plan on their use of their confidential funds. So my amendment now is just an idea, subject to style. If all those agencies receiving confidential funds will be required, not only DepEd, but will be required to create and submit a work plan on their use of the said confidential funds. So more or less, the wording will be as follows. Work plan for confidential funds. Agencies receiving confidential funds shall submit to both houses of Congress their proposed work plan for the appropriated confidential funds of their agency. Or words to that effect.
We accept subject to style and with the proviso that it will be in the general provision, so it will be of general applicability.
Yes, thank you.
We accept, Mr. President.
Okay, so everybody, all agencies, ano na apektado? Section 7. Okay na? Okay na? Section 78. Ano? Both out. So, that would be all, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any
Thank you.
objection?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you
There
very
being
much,
none, the amendment is
distinguished minority
accepted.
leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may I move for a minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
A minute.
Mr. President, there being no member who wishes to propose individual amendments, I move to close the period of individual amendments. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion of the majority floor leader, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we vote on second reading on House Bill number 4488 as amended. So moved, Mr. President.
Before we vote on the matter, this is an administrative matter, the secretary is directed to insert into the records a list of committee amendments which the body approved earlier, copies of which have been distributed to the members. Yes, so there being no objection to the motion for second reading on our budget, national budget, there being no objection, motion is approved. May I ask the secretary now to read the certification for third reading?
We are voting ayes and nays, Mr. President, and I think...
Is there any objection?
yes.
Is there any objection?
Yeah, second reading. Second reading. Yes, there's no objection, Mr. President.
Yes, therefore I already moved.
Yes, Mr. President, and so we ask the Secretary to read the letter of certification from our President that this is indeed a certified measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, please proceed, Secretary.
Malacañang Palace, Manila, 21 November 2022. Senator Juan Miguel F. Zubiri, Senate President, the Philippine Senate, Pasay City. Mr. Senate President, pursuant to the provisions of Article 6, Section 26, Paragraph 2 of the 1987 Constitution, I hereby certify to the necessity of the immediate enactment of House Bill Number 4488, an act appropriating funds for the operation of the government of the Republic of the Philippines from January 1 to December 31, 2023, in order to address the need to maintain continuous government operations following the end of the current fiscal year, to expedite the funding of various programs, projects, and activities for FY 2023, and to ensure budgetary preparedness that will enable the government to effectively perform its constitutional mandate. Best regards, very truly yours, the President of the Philippines.
Mr. President, just to make sure, because the chairman whispered to me, just to make sure, Mr. President, that all members voted in the affirmative for the approval of the second reading, Mr. President. Can
That's
we,
correct, because there was no objection from any
Thank you,
member.
Mr. President. With that, with the reading of the letter coming from the President that this is indeed a certified measure, Mr. President, I move that we vote on third reading on House Bill number
Before we act on the third reading, we'll
After,
continue.
Mr. President, yes.
Yeah,
Let me again move, Mr. President, that we approve on third reading House Bill number 4488. I so move, Mr. President.
Before we act on the
Yes,
motion,
yes.
we'd like to recognize the minority.
Correct, because I will be objecting, Mr. President, because it is not, Mr. President, it is not right that we just accept the certification from the President. In effect, we are rushing unjustifiably the enactment of the 2023 GAA. The Constitution is clear. The President certifies to the necessity of the immediate enactment of a proposed law, like the GAA, to meet, number one, a public calamity or an emergency. You just don't certify that it is certified to the necessity of its immediate enactment. May purpose ang certification. So today, absent such reason, the certification has no leg to stand on. In the opinion of this representation today, there is no public calamity or emergency to speak of that will justify the dispensing of the rule 3 readings on separate days. And then if you look at the communication from the Office of the President, he's not citing also a public calamity or an emergency. Ang nakasulat lang po doon, to maintain continuous government operations, strengthen efforts to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, support initiatives towards national economic recovery. So therefore, although speed is what we will achieve, this representation moves that we follow what is stated in the Constitution. At any rate, what is the practical effect if we do not rush the approval? We approve it on Monday, where we have also a scheduled Senate session, Mr. President. So, the budget law consists of more or less 3,500 pages. So, Meron pa tayong motion kanina subject to style. Meron pa tayong mga some items that siguro we should be given time to look at the final form of this bill that we are going to approve on third reading, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Well, Mr. President, just to put on record that there is a precedent on this particular matter.
Many.
Mr. President. In fact, if you look at the records of the Senate, I have not seen any at any instance, Mr. President, that we did not or we just ignored the letter coming from the President that indeed this is certified and the priority measure, Mr. President.
Yes, if I may, Majority Leader, I was a Majority Leader for almost 7 years. And in that 7 years' time, I've seen certifications even for local bills that are being rushed during the last few days of Congress. I have seen almost all budget deliberations that have certifications. Almost all had been certified by the President, and we act on it on second and third reading, Your Honors. If you can recall, when you were also the Senate President, Senator Coco, we also rushed 2 budgets under your time, and both of them had certifications from the President. So I think out of precedence, we are not violating any rule or we are violating any tradition. As a matter of fact, we're upholding tradition because budgets are always certified by the President in so many decades.
Well, Mr. President, to dispense with the objection of the minority leader, we can do viva voce voting, Mr. President, if that is the case.
Yes, absolutely. There being no objection, the motion of the majority leader is approved.
Those who are in
So
favor.
those who are in favor of passing the budget on third reading, say aye. Those who are against, say nay. Yes, passing today. Yes, the ayes have it, gentlemen and ladies. So please proceed, Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President. Now I'm moving, Mr. President, for the previous question, to vote on third reading on House Bill number 4488. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, motion is approved. We'll now ask the Secretary to proceed with the roll call vote.
Roll call vote. The Honorable Senator Angara.
Yes.
Senator Binay. Senator Cayetano Alan. Senator Cayetano Pia. Senator De La Rosa. Senator Ejercito. Senator Escudero. Senator Estrada. Senator Gatchalian. Senator Go. Senator Ontiveros. Senator Lapid. Senator Legarda. Senator Marcos. Senator Padilla. Senator Pimentel.
And we'll explain later.
Senator Poe. Senator Revilla. Senator Tolentino. Senator Tulfo. Senator Villanueva. Senator Villar Cynthia. Senator Villar Mark. The Senate President.
Yes. Nobody objected? There are 21 affirmative votes and no negative votes and no abstentions. Congratulations to the chairman and to the
Thank you. Thank you very much,
Committee on Finance.
Mr. President. To our colleagues, a very big word of gratitude to all of you for that we're on schedule and we hope to have a new budget on time
But,
under the new
bef-
administration. Salamat to your leadership, Mr.
Thank you.
President, to the majority leader, to the pro tempore. Thank you for paving the way to our vice chairpersons and all the members of the Senate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. And hopefully that will be the end of all the envelopes and folders that are delivered here to the Senate. And the good gentleman from Davao, Senator Bato de la Rosa, will heave a sigh of relief. Okay, we'd like
Mr.
to recognize
President.
our minority leader.
Yes,
I
Mr.
believe.
President, the minority leader is asking the majority leader if we could have 1 minute suspension to
Oh, session
congratulate the
suspended.
chair.
Session suspended.
Thank you. Minority Leader would like to explain his vote. I move that he be recognized, Senator Coco Pimentel.
Before I recognize Senator Coco Pimentel, I failed to mention the name of the bill. It's House Bill number 4488 under Committee Report number 10, which was approved without any objection or abstention earlier on third reading. For the record, with 21 votes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move for the previous question. We recognize Senator Coco Pimentel.
We recognize the distinguished
Thank you.
minority leader.
Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. President, to explain my vote. I'll just give the outline of the explanation of my vote, subject to submission of an elaboration in writing, Mr. President. I have reservations about our national budget for 2023. First of all, I believe that the presentation of the budget is not that accurate. It is presented as a 5.268 trillion peso budget, but actually there is 588 billion in unprogrammed appropriations, which to this representation must be included in the bottom line of the budget as we announce it to the people. So the actual increase in the budget for 2023 year on year is not 4%, because that 4% does not take into account the unprogrammed appropriations of 588 billion pesos. It's actually 11%, Mr. President. And then, of course, there are still lump sum allotments found in the budget, the most famous of which are there are lump sum, lump sum allotments, there are centrally managed items, and then the most famous of these funds as lump sum allotments are the so-called confidential and intelligence funds. It is the opinion of the undersigned that, given the current definition of what a confidential fund is, where you can charge confidential expenses, some civilian government agencies cannot be justifiable recipients of the said funds. However, the 2023 budget has positive features, Mr. President. The budget, of course, gives priority to the Department of Agriculture. 44% ang increase po dyan. And of course, the DA's budget was strongly supported by our subcommittee chairwoman on the Department of Agriculture. And of course, the budget observes the constitutional priority given to education, the education sector, and social services, na kailangan po ng ating mga kababayan ngayon. Binombahan din po yan ng ating 2023 budget. Tama po yun kasi mahirap ang lagay po ng ating mga kababayan ngayon. Kailangan ng kung ano man maitulong ng gobyerno para makatawid. No? Makatawid, sabi ko nga, sa ngayon, papunta sa bukas. So from today to tomorrow. And of course, our health sector is also being supported. And ito pa ang magandang feature po rito, for the very first time, we will now have the budget for the Department of Migrant Workers para po sa ating mga OFWs. And our transportation system will hopefully be also helped by the budget because of the unprecedented show of support, pouring of funds to the Department of Transportation. And at least this 2023 budget also attempts to help our local government units. Meron po ako nakita maraming mga programa doon na makakatulong po sa ating mga local government units. At any rate, this is the first budget of the Marcos administration, so the attitude should be to give the benefit of the doubt. Give it the chance to give the Marcos administration the chance to execute its very first whole year budget. Gaya po ng sinabi ko nung umpisa when we self-identified with the minority, the minority is here for constructive cooperation, not obstruction. And then, Mr. President, another good feature of the budget for 2023 would be because the chairman accepted this representation's amendments, we will help the Bureau of Fire Protection to purchase fire trucks, which are much needed. We also showed our full support to the NBI. We gave the Philippine Creatives Industries now their first ever budget under the DTI. And we provided for the clamor of the retired employees of IBC for their much delayed and long-awaited retirement benefits. And we also provided for a subsidy for the Philippine Postal Corporation to reimburse them for their franking privilege expenses. But I'd like to point out that ito pong tatlong bagay din na yung public health emergency benefits and allowances for healthcare and non-healthcare workers, social pension for senior citizens, and the reimbursement to PhilPost, our postal system, have been lodged in the unprogrammed appropriation. So I hope that this will not be illusory. I hope that these three very important items in the 2023 budget will really be funded by the administration. So we will now, after the approval of the budget, Mr. President, we will now have to oversee, monitor how the budget is executed. So masasabi ko na lang po sa mga national government agencies, see you next year in the next budget cycle. Yes, we will try our best to be better next year, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I promise you that next year, we'll make it 2 weeks naman, like 5 days, 5 days. Para we don't have to put all together several budgets of several departments. So we can deliberate more carefully and scrutinize more efficiently. Our Deputy
Yeah,
Minority
Mr.
Floor
President,
Leader-
let me put on record that after your statement, the Senate staff are actually clapping their hands, Mr.
Happy,
President.
they're very happy.
And very happy. Move that we recognize our Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros. So
Our
move, Mr.
distinguished Deputy Minority Floor Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros is recognized.
Salamat kaayo, Mr. President. Just a very brief manifestation that I will submit my explanation of yes vote in writing. Salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. And we appreciate that the minority, both Senator Risa Ontiveros and Senator Coco Pimentel, voted in the affirmative, giving this budget the benefit of the doubt. Anyway, next year, we have oversight functions, and we have oversight on the CIFs, and we also have the review functions of each committee.
Thank
Majority
you.
Leader?
Yes, Mr. President, let me put on record that we appreciate the hard work of our committee chairperson, the Senate Finance Committee Chair, Sani Angara, and congratulations also to the co-sponsors of the measure. Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we designate the bicameral conferees for House Bill number 4488. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion Majority Leader is approved. Please proceed to read the names. I don't have the
Yes,
names.
Mr. President. Mr. President, the following senators are
I'll
here.
be the one. May I be the
Okay,
one?
please, Mr. President.
Excuse me, the Senate President. The Senate President designates, of course, members of the BICAM, starting with the chairperson, Senator Sani Angara, Senior Vice Chairperson, Senator Cayetano, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Vice Chairperson, Senator Cynthia Villar, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa, Senator Win Gatchalian, Senator Christopher Bongo, Senator Risa Ontiveros, Senator Nancy Binay, Senator Grace Poe, Senator Francis Tol Tolentino, Senator Mark Villar, and Senator J.V. Ejercito, and members as well, Senator Alan Peter Cayetano, Senator Francis Escudero, and Senator Jinggoy Estrada. That is 17 members of the BICAM.
Thank you, Mr. President, that they are so designated. Mr. President, may I move for a minute, 1 Senate minute suspension, Mr. President?
Do we go back or wala na? Yes, I'd just like to remind our dear colleagues that the delegation of the People's Socialist Republic of Vietnam are on the way here. It's a high-level delegation. But before we suspend, we'd like to also acknowledge the presence of my Tita Mila Magsaysay, Congresswoman Mila Magsaysay of Party List Senior Citizens, together with her colleagues and member of the Senior Citizens, Philip Salvador. Yes, he's also part of the group. Thank
Chairman
you.
Emeritus, Mr. President.
Chairman Emeritus.
He is the Chairman Emeritus.
Partner of my father yan, kaya may senior na yan. And so may we proceed with the motion to suspend while we await the delegation of the People's Socialist Republic of Vietnam.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So there being no objection to the motion, we suspend for a moment until we can receive our friends from the Vietnamese delegation. Session suspended.
by His Excellency Vuong Dinh Hue, the President of the National Assembly of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. The Honorable Nguyen Ngoc Dinh, Vice President of the National Assembly. The Honorable Bu Huy Van Quong, Secretary General and Head of the National Assembly Office. The Honorable Wen Thi Tanc, Head of the Deputies Affairs Commission of the National Assembly. The Honorable Major General Lee Tan Toy, Chairman, National Defense and Security Committee. The Honorable Lee Ming Ho An, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. The Honorable Wen Tanc Nhi, Minister of Construction. The Honorable Pham Day Duong, Head of Puyen Provincial Parliamentary Delegation. The Honorable Wen Ming Vu, First Vice Minister, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Honorable Ngo Tanc Zan, Head Dak Nong Provincial Parliamentary Delegation. The Honorable Major General Wen Van Long, Vice Minister, Ministry of Public Security. The Honorable Wen Man Tin, Vice Chairman, Foreign Affairs Committee of the National Assembly. Accompanying them, Mr. President, is their Ambassador of Vietnam to the Philippines, His Excellency Wang Huy Chung. And the Honorable Pham Thi Ha, Vice Chairman of the National Assembly Office, Assistant to the President of the National Assembly. The Honorable Chan Thi Hong An, Permanent Member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Vice President of the Vietnam-ASEAN Parliamentary Friendship Group. Mr. President, we welcome all of them at this August Chamber, the Senate of the Philippines. His Excellency Vuong Dinh Hue is the fourth highest ranking official in Vietnam's political structure after the General Secretary of the Vietnamese Communist Party, their President, and their Prime Minister. This high-level visit aims to forge closer parliamentary ties between the Philippines and Vietnam and further strengthen our warm and robust relationship.
Thank you very much, Majority Leader. We would like to welcome with open arms His Excellency President Hue, and we thank you for honoring our invitation to be here today in the Philippine Senate. From all of us senators present, we wholeheartedly say to you, Your Excellency, Mai Laban. You say that right? Mai Laban. Friends forever.
Indeed, friends forever, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture, I move to consider proposed Senate Resolution number 303 and allow the Secretary General to read the title of the said resolution.
There being no objection to the motion of the Majority Floor Leader, the motion is approved. We direct the Secretary to read the resolution number 303.
Resolution commending the National Assembly of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam under the leadership of its President, His Excellency Vuong Dinh Hue, for strengthening Philippines-Vietnam inter-parliamentary relations.
Mr. President, at this juncture, may we recognize the gentleman from Davao, Senator Bato de la Rosa, to sponsor the resolution.
We would like to recognize the distinguished gentleman from Davao, our former Chief of the Philippine National Police, former General, and now Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today to sponsor PS Resolution number 303, commending the National Assembly of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam under the leadership of our esteemed guest of honor, His Excellency President Vuong Dinh Hue, and further strengthening Philippines-Vietnam interparliamentary relations. Our good majority leader has already formally acknowledged the President's presence together with his delegation, and we truly appreciate their timely visit. We warmly welcome you to the Senate of the Philippines. His Excellency Vuong Dinh Hue is considered the fourth highest ranking official in Vietnam political structure, after the General Secretary of the Vietnamese Communist Party, the President as the head of state, and the Prime Minister as head of government. His visit today here in the Senate is a historic one as we aim to forge closer parliamentary ties between our countries and further strengthen our warm and robust relationship which spans for more than 45 years since 1976. Yesterday, Mr. President, I reported my official visit to Hanoi, Vietnam, where I was warmly welcomed by two high-ranking officials of the National Assembly, Vice Chairman Lieutenant General Chang Quang Phong, as well as Secretary General Voy Van Cong. And their other colleagues who are members of the Vietnam-ASEAN Parliamentary Friendship Group. During the meetings, we covered many areas of cooperation and acknowledged the importance of the strategic partnership between the Philippines and Vietnam, and also discussed important topics including defense, maritime security, pandemic recovery, economy and trade, as well as people-to-people exchanges. With Vietnam as our sole strategic partner with the ASEAN, we realize the paramount importance of enhancing our interparliamentary relations with Vietnam's National Assembly. It was a very productive trip, and we thank the National Assembly of Vietnam for their warm hospitality and for receiving me and my delegation in their beautiful Parliament building located in their historic city center. Mr. President, my dear colleagues, this visit of His Excellency President Vuong Dien Hue is a milestone to our interparliamentary relations, being the first head of the National Assembly to ever hold an official visit to the Philippines after 16 years, upon the invitation of our Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri. Likewise, it is historic as we are heading towards the 50th anniversary of the establishment of our diplomatic relations. For the record, the Philippines and Vietnam became strategic partners on November 17, 2015, after signing a joint statement recognizing the evolving political, economic, and security architecture in the ASEAN region, as well as the consolidation of the ASEAN community amidst an increasingly globalized and interdependent world economy. This strategic partnership aims to comprehensively elevate political, economic, and cultural cooperation, as well as develop and strengthen engagement in key functional areas. It is envisioned to build upon and enhance existing bilateral mechanisms, operationalize concluded agreements, and explore new avenues to deepen the engagement between our two governments. Allow me therefore, Mr. President, to mention the various areas of cooperation we have with Vietnam, which are considered the two main anchors of this partnership. First, on maritime cooperation. Maritime security, including cooperation on the South China Sea, is an important anchor on our strategic partnership. A major source of impetus for elevating Philippines-Vietnam ties to strategic partnership was the shared concern for maritime security, especially the shared situation of the Philippines and Vietnam as major littoral states in the South China Sea or West Philippine Sea, confronting a complex dispute, including the overextended claims of China and its coercive actions to assert these claims. Given our shared maritime interests and concerns, both countries stand to benefit through constructive maritime dialogues, as well as on the exchange of intelligence and approaches. On the second main anchor, economic trade cooperation. In 2021, Vietnam is the Philippines' 11th largest trading partner, 5th largest within ASEAN, 12th export market and 10th import supplier. Total trade amounted to 5.84 billion US dollars, with Philippine exports to Vietnam at 1.64 billion US dollars and Philippine imports from Vietnam at 4.196 billion US dollars. As of August 2022, the Philippines was Vietnam's top export market of rice, reaching more than 305,000 tons valued at 140 million US dollars, accounting for 65% total volume and 63% of total value of exports. We thank Vietnam for unhampered trade of Vietnamese rice to the Philippines even during the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic, and for Vietnam's commitment to be a stable and quality rice supplier of the Philippines. We are truly grateful for making the Philippines a priority when it comes to your rice exports, and for being an important partner in food security. We assure Vietnam that both our governments will maintain close coordination to further facilitate unrestricted rice trade. The Philippines-Vietnam Parliamentary Friendship Association, Mr. President, their colleagues and guests, I am glad to inform you that our Philippines-Vietnam Parliamentary Friendship Association and the Philippines Senate has 14 senators as members, and this humble representation serving as president. We assure our counterparts in the National Assembly of Vietnam that through our respective parliamentary friendship groups, we hope to renew our inter-parliamentary friendship and foster more important exchanges in the future. All this made possible through the able leadership of President Vuong Dinh Hue and the entire National Assembly of Vietnam in promoting and further strengthening parliamentary ties. We look forward that both our parliaments will continue to enjoy an excellent working relationship as we continue to collaborate towards realizing the vast potential of the Philippines-Vietnam strategic partnership. Given all these mentioned considerations, I therefore urge this August chamber for the immediate adoption of this proposed resolution. Thank you, and to His Excellency and his delegation, we say, May laban, forever friend. Kaibigan, magpakailanman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Bato de la Rosa. And again, Mr. President, we would like to reiterate once again that we take this opportunity to express our deepest gratitude to the government of Vietnam, which was very quick to come to the aid of our people during trying times. We also hope that the short visit of His Excellency Vuong Dinh Hue and the rest of the delegation will be fruitful and one that can further strengthen and elevate the strategic partnership between our nations, as well as explore new areas of cooperation that can be mutually beneficial for our people. With that, Mr. President, I move for the adoption of proposed Senate Resolution number 303. I so move, Mr. President.
Before I act on the motion of the majority floor leader, may I just like to manifest that all members be made co-author and principal sponsor, co-sponsor of this measure. And also, I'd like to take this time, with the permission of the body, I will no longer go down to the podium downstairs, to give my manifestation commending the National Assembly of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam under the leadership of its President, His Excellency Vuong Dinh Hue, for strengthening Philippine and Vietnam inter-parliamentary relations. Last Monday, I had a pleasure of meeting the Ambassador Wang Hui Xiong, from which I came away with a renewed appreciation of the deep alliance between the Philippines and Vietnam. We are, of course, the other's sole strategic partners in the ASEAN. We are actually strategic allies, united in our goal of attaining mutual progress as burgeoning Southeast Asian economies. We are united in our need to fortify our geopolitical powers and maritime security. And we are allied through our economic and social cultural cooperation and exchanges. Our interparliamentary relations are central in strengthening our bilateral ties. To this end, I applaud the National Assembly of Vietnam for being our steadfast partners in improving our bilateral cooperations in tourism, education, trade and investments, defense and security, agriculture and fisheries, to name a few. This is a momentous visit, marking the first interparliamentary exchanges between our countries since 2006, when our then Senate President Manny Villar met with his counterparts, His Excellency Ngu Wen Phu Trong, when then President of the National Assembly, during the 27th General Assembly of the ASEAN Parliamentary Organization. Let me also highlight the fact that we have a Senate Parliamentary Friendship Group, as mentioned by our distinguished colleague, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa, the Philippines-Vietnam Parliamentary Friendship Association, which was formerly headed by our Senate President Pro Tem, the Vice President of the Senate, Senator Lauren Legarda, which she gladly passed on to our equally energetic and dynamic Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa as its new president. So, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Your Excellency, I invite our colleagues to join in our commendation of the National Assembly of the People's Socialist Republic of Vietnam and to its president, President Vuong Dinh Hue. I say to you all, welcome to the Senate and welcome to the Philippines. Come on, come on. Thank you, thank you. So, there being no objection to the motion of our Majority Floor Leader, the resolution is hereby adopted and approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I now move for a few minutes suspension to allow the President of the National Assembly and the Ambassador to accept a copy of the resolution from the presiding officer at the rostrum.
May we include the Vice President as well of
Yes,
the National
Mr. President,
Assembly?
and I also would like to ask our colleagues present here to join our Senate President in this representation at the rostrum, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. With that, we move for a 1-minute suspension and invite our distinguished guests to the podium. Session suspended.
We're ready to resume. Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, November 28, 2022. I so move, Mr. President.
Before I adjourn, I'd just like to thank our colleagues for staying for the parliamentary visit of the delegation of Vietnam. Thank you to our Minority Floor Leader, our Deputy Minority Floor Leader, to all the members. There is a bilateral meeting with them. I would encourage you highly to join us. And we have a very sumptuous dinner. We're hosting them for dinner in Sofitel. If you can pass by for at least an hour to join us, they would love to interact with all of you. And there are different ministers. By the way, the members of parliament, my dear colleagues that are there, are also ministers of their departments, of their ministries. So with that, there being no objection to the motion of the Majority Floor Leader, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, November 28, 2022. Maraming salamat sa inyo lahat.
Thank you, Mr. President.